The cup is drained. All that remains are the dregs. Noel returns after an unexpected adventure and sees a familiar face. Oscar needs help. Larson is not leaving the poker table just yet. Yellow wants out. Daniel hears an unexpected knock at the door. Again. Marie befriends him. Dregs. The last remaining parts. By SupposedToBeWriting. Read by Charlie Golightly. Spoilers for Part 40 of Malevolent. General content warnings. In Chapter 1, a discussion of war wounds, amputation, past torture, alcoholism, and a brief mention of past historical xenophobia. Chapter 1. Noel is unprepared. It's about the stupidest damn thing he's ever heard. He's had plenty of time to prepare. A week on that damn boat with nothing but his own damn company and ears to chew off. Noel has a notebook on which he has written an actual, goddamn, to-do list for the first time in his life. He's gone over every scenario in his head, and sometimes aloud to well-meaning boat passengers who are just trying to make it in this crazy, crazy world. And now, he's standing there like a dumbass, while the disembarking passengers part around him like the Red Sea. New York stretches before him, the same old shithole he's fallen in love with. The city smells stronger than the river. It is a real treat to be back in a country where he speaks the language, but he can't help but feel like he's missed the party nevertheless. The Big Apple is blacked out in the bathtub, and he's standing there with a bag of potato chips in hand, ringing the doorbell. As cross-Atlantic voyages go, Noel raced here. 3 weeks is pretty fucking good for a guy who woke up bleeding to death in picturesque La Playa de la Strand. He'd stumbled to the house of a shepherd that only spoke Spanish, but thank God that mortal wounds are pretty much universal. Cue the hospital, cue a translator, cue owing a favor to an old archaeology contact, cue tons of lies, cue a loan he has to pay back, cue a one-way ticket on a passenger liner to New York goddamn city. Noel had worked on things one step at a time, to make them manageable. Only now, when it all stretches out before him, when his future is wider than a highway, he's choking a little. Jeez, he rasped while people continue to push past him. They nudge his shoulder or thump against his small suitcase, but he stuck to the spot. Come on, Charlie. Move your legs, he complains. You got things to do, people to see. We gotta find out what happened. We gotta find out if Lester's detective practically jolts him out of his skin. Noel turns on his heel, and as luck would have it, there's only one other person in the station totally blocking foot traffic. The priest is getting less dirty looks than Noel is. It's the cassock. Oscar? He yelps, far louder than he means to. His throat throbs in pain at the sudden noise. Uncomfortably, the bandages around his neck feel warmer than usual. Nah, these days, he isn't speaking much higher than a whisper. Not unless he wants to show some fine folks how far he can spit blood. His brain hasn't gotten the memo. He slaps a hand against his neck, wincing. It distracts him a little, enough that he doesn't see Oscar lurch forward, closing the distance between them. Noel opens his eyes again just as he is about to get assaulted by a priest. Or, he guesses, get hugged by one. Honestly, it wasn't any more expected than a punch to the nose would have been. Oscar throws an arm around his neck. Letting out a noise of surprise, Noel is yanked down a few inches. His hands shoot out to his sides automatically, trying to keep his balance. Okay, so maybe he doesn't know Oscar all that well, but he really wouldn't have figured Oscar to be a hugger. Not like he minds, but only when he knocks his nose against the side of Oscar's head does the truth make itself known. Oh ho ho, he chuckles in realization. Oscar's stinkin' drunk. On a Sunday, even. Is it Easter? Honestly, Noel isn't judging. He's got no room to. One hand stills on the priest's shoulder. You smell like a bathtub during Prohibition, pal. What the hell are you doing here? He sees Oscar's brow furrow in confusion, uncomprehending as he backs away from the hug. His other sleeve is stitched neatly shut at the elbow. Well, guess he didn't grow that arm back. Look at the two of them. They look like they just got back from the Battle of Verdun. Oscar shrugs his bulky shoulders. I wanted to talk to you as soon as possible about what had happened. For being full of drink, he's remarkably coherent. Noel guesses he gotta be, as a priest. Some of those Bible verses are tough, stone-cold sober. What? He asks in fake indignation. You didn't care about my well-being at all? Oscar, you're a priest. Do your job. That makes Oscar chuckle. Eases the tension a little, at least on Noel's end. Truth be told, he doesn't know this guy all that well. He certainly didn't expect him to show up. As far as he figured, Oscar's involvement in all this ended as soon as he got his arm chopped off. It's true for the army, anyhow. Yes, Of course, I wanted to make sure you were all right. Oscar frets. I'm working off very incomplete information, of course. But when I got word that you were in Spain, of all bloody places. Whoa. Who told you I was in Spain? One of the detectives at the precinct. Wow, what a bunch of narcs. Should have figured, though. He had called them because, well, that guy still needed to pay rent. Thank God they bought his cover story. He'd gotten a lead on Karen, and went in without backup, because he's a crazy son of a bitch. Got knocked out, stuffed in a cargo crate. Woke up in Spain. Weirder things have happened. Weirder things did happen. Still doesn't explain why the clergy is rubbing elbow with the cops. He raises an eyebrow. It's his best interrogation tool. Of course, I was trying to figure out what happened, detective. They found a body in Grand Terminal. The butcher. How'd you tell without a head? He does feel a little bad. One good shootout doesn't make up for the lives the butcher took, but he doesn't know. Whenever he thinks of the butcher, he thinks of their shoulder blades bumping against each other as they fought back to back. He remembers the laughter and the singing. For better or for worse, that shootout had felt incredible. Like he was finally getting a win. And a judge for one of the circuit courts, and plenty of blood. But everyone else looks like they just disappeared. I couldn't track down anyone else. Not Larson. Not anyone in the order. Not Arthur. Oscar eventually admits, somewhat quieter. Noel's got a feeling he knows who Oscar put in the most legwork for. He's not offended. Arthur is a 1 in a million guy. Who is he? People get tortured by gods every day. Besides, if Oscar abruptly went missing, Noel doesn't think he'd show up at the docks for him. He's not that good a guy. Still, Noel does wish he could answer the guy's questions. Look, Father, I can't tell you everything I know, but it's... Where Arthur went, I don't think we can go. Some of the light leaves Oscar's eyes. There's a weird dissonance between the cheery, red-tinged cheeks of a drunk and the dead eyes of a man pushed to the brink. Stonily, he asks, You're sure? He's dead then? What? Oh. No. I mean, literally. I don't think we can go there. There was this guy, this god, I guess. He wanted something from him. Maybe? I don't know. He didn't seem all that keen on letting him go. If he took him somewhere, I don't know where he would have taken him. His throat is starting to prickle. Sometimes Noel can push through it, if he really wants to impress the pretty Polish princess 4 bunks down from him. He just needs a second to think about how to explain this. Any of this. Even for a guy who dipped his toe into it. Noel doesn't want to explain to this guy about his own involvement with the King in Yellow. Maybe he can breeze past that. Even sloshed as a bucket, Oscar seems to catch on. He dips his head in assent. All right, come on. We shouldn't stay here. You probably need to get some rest. Are you walking me to my apartment? Feels like I'm leading you to my den of sin. Oscar doesn't answer that. That should have been Noel's first clue. Instead, he remarks, Hope your voyage went well, at least. Together they return to the flow of traffic. Oscar's a squat guy who comes up to his shoulder, thereabouts. In his cassock, he's like a little shadow. Noel doesn't want to say it out loud because it feels dickish, but it's kind of nice to walk next to a guy with no arm. There's none of that awkward hand bumping. You know, Noel offers. Had to keep him from changing the family name at Ellis. They already lobbed off half the letters when my grandpa came over. I don't have a lot of others to work with. Oscar titters. Dauda, it had been. Shortened to Dowd. Of course, he's not going to be giving his life story to the guy. First name or last name. Spilling his guts to a guy that he barely met. Well, Arthur was different. Like he said, 1 in a million. And a damn good investigator. Noel half wished he could have seen Arthur and his investigator partner at their prime. They were probably a force to be reckoned with. Still, he has to admit that he's grateful for Oscar's company. They walk on the streets of New York, and they're familiar enough, but having a guy who knows even 5% of what went down makes Noel feel less crazy. And if they run into anyone who needs their head shoved in with a bedpan, Noel knows just the guy. They walk a few moments more in silence. Noel can't bring himself to interrupt it. Not because they're having a real heart-to-heart here, because he's traded a few seconds of pain to make a joke. Jesus, he's gonna have to work on that. Your neck, you keep rubbing at it. And your voice. I didn't want to bring it up, but... Yeah, real classy are you. You know you're not supposed to ask those things. What's it been? A decade since the war? Oscar doesn't even do him the decency of pretending to look flustered. He just gives him that hazy, grazing cow look that's all the rage with inebriates. Noel cracks a shit-eating grin. Well, Oscar, I got shot. They gave me the prognosis in Spanish, and I couldn't tell you what it hit, considering taking up chain smoking as a cover. It's not the first time that his voice has been ruined like this. 4 months at a time in the Dreamlands, he couldn't so much as whisper. A mixture of having nobody to talk to, little water to parch his thirst, and the usual rounds of screaming. Sure, he's never going to sing the national anthem at a baseball game, but comparatively, Noel has been through the worst already. He knows it in his soul. Nothing could be worse than that. Therefore, this is fine. He is fine. Well, I'm sorry for it, Oscar says, and Jesus Christ, Noel can't manage more than a half-second look at the guy's face. There's an astonishing amount of sincerity and concern written on it, framed with eyes that seem almost wet. It stops his heart dead in his chest. The thing is, if Noel thinks about it like that, as something other people will pity, then that makes it real. Otherwise, he can keep it at arm's length, like some terrible dream. That works for him. He swallows and pushes forward, grasping at the first line of conversation he can think of. Anyway, how did that happen? Noel asks, gesturing towards Oscar's sleeve. Arthur told me that you lost an arm, but wouldn't tell me the details. I didn't know. Oscar shrugs one shoulder. It was an axe. The day before you two left for the meeting. Axe? Now hang on. Hang on a second. Noel has to blink. He didn't know what he'd been expecting. Arthur hadn't been forthcoming on the details. Who carries an axe around? That's not a normal thing to... This isn't New Orleans. Well, it's not that unusual. What's a normal thing to hit people with, detective? There's something playful in his expression. Either Oscar is coping the same way he is, or he's a fantastically well-adjusted guy. Given that Noel could whip out his lighter and set Oscar's breath on fire, he really doubts it's the latter. A baseball bat? Your fists? A really big rock? Lester never mentioned anything about it. When did you get chopped with an axe? It's a long story. When's the last time that you've eaten? Are you hungry? He is, as a point of fact. Noel's stomach has never really behaved on ships, a fact that Roland thought was very funny when they agreed he'd go to Egypt. Before he can answer, though, Oscar barrels onward. There's a diner near here. I'll buy you lunch. I could tell you my story. Again, Oscar rolls his shoulder at him. You can tell me yours. All of yours. I'll show you mine if you show me yours, huh? Noel knows the diner that Oscar's talking about. Christ, but does it sound good right now. He wants the calm before the storm to last a little longer. His next few days are going to be chasing down leads, and from the sounds of it, Oscar's done plenty of legwork with little to show. Granted, he's a priest, not a detective. But Noel doesn't know. Something itches him about his drunken companion. After all, it is a Sunday. Oscar came to see him off the ship, and he wants to pay for lunch. Feels like Oscar is buttering him up. But what for? Noel's not keeping any secrets from him. They could just as easily sit in the park and let Noel spill his guts about how, yeah, actually, he doesn't know where Arthur Lester got to. So, really, Oscar's back at square one. Ah, damn. No, he knows what this is. His last foray with the partner didn't go so hot. Ended up with lead poisoning in his neck. The one before that, well, he'd been some godfuck's prisoner for 10 years. You want to work together, he says with a resigned sigh. Oscar twitches next to him. His lips momentarily purse in frustration at being caught out. You can't bullshit a bullshitter. You don't just want to know my side of the story. You want to work with me. Oscar's momentary flinch is replaced with a raised chin, a squaring of his shoulders. What, and you're gonna just let it go? He dares him. 2 heads are better than 1. I've not made much progress alone. I don't think you will either. But together. The thing is, Noel was alone. He was alone in the Dreamlands, that yellow rain slicker motherfucker notwithstanding. But he was alone after, too. Sometimes, Noel thinks he was alone right up until he met Arthur Lester. And now he's alone again, because Arthur Lester is somewhere, / dead. It's harder this time, somehow, to be alone. He wonders how he coped after he escaped the Dreamlands. Noel traded that memory away. Whatever he saw the moment he stepped out of that realm, zap, gone, poof. Noel thinks the sun might have been involved, because the sun seems a little dimmer than it had before. Noel swallows and comes to a stop in the middle of the street. Oscar is meeting his gaze levelly. This guy has lost an arm, and he's still here. Maybe Noel can drum up the right combination of words to make the guy go running, sure, but maybe... Nah, maybe he's just stupid. Maybe this isn't over it. Jesus, Father, did anyone ever tell you Sunday is a day of rest? Alright. Come on, let's go put our heads together. See if we can't make 2 halves of one story.
Why can't we be ourselves like we were yesterday? Why can't we be ourselves like we were yesterday? Every time I see you falling, I get down on my knees and pray.
Dregs, the last remaining parts. By SupposedToBeWriting. Spoilers for Part 40 of Malevolent. General content warnings. In Chapter 2, some mild gore discussions, plus a decent amount of blood. Chapter 2. The sun shines down on Larson, hot and bright. He's escaped the worst of it under this rocky overhang. But it's still sweltering. Larson can't see his feet, where they feel the strongest rays, but he imagines they must be halfway to medium well by now. Truth be told, Larson had crawled up here to die. Except he hadn't. He still hasn't. He keeps on living, in fact. Larson doesn't know how, exactly. All of the blood has dried and stiffened on him, too thick for him to probe his wounds. His cheeks are stiff with the stuff, and God knows what else. And well, he can't hardly move. Whatever's kept him alive, it's done nothing for the pain. Every twitch or flinch is agony. For the first time in his life, Larson just wants to lay there and rest.
Get the fuck up.
He sighs long and heavy through his nostrils. Easier to lay there and let the sun cook him. They never got sun so nice in Addison, that was for sure. Reminds him of his days as a boy down south, before they got called up to the snowy mountains. You could lay down on the ground and feel like a bug pinned to the earth underneath all that sun. First time Larson became aware of something greater.
Didn't you hear me?
Yellow's voice rattles against the edges of his mind. Like a tax collector, he's a hard fellow to ignore.
I said, get the fuck up.
No, he says flatly. Usually he puts on a show of it. A bit more panache is always welcome for a creature like Yellow. Now, though, he's putting the toys away and shutting the door. Playtime is most definitely over. Don't think I will. Don't think I can is probably more accurate, all told. But Yellow doesn't need to know that. Yellow's always been frustrated by the fragility of the mortal body. He always treated Lawson's weakness after projections like it was some character flaw. Well, phooey. Lawson's put on a good show, he thinks, not giving Yellow any cracks to stick his pointed little fingers in. This gambit only works if Yellow trusts him. Cat's out of the bag now, it seems. Lawson doesn't see a way out of this just yet. Maybe it is the end, however hazy the concept feels. Give him a minute. He'll think of something. Or he'll die here. The thought doesn't terrify him like it once would have.
I can separate us if we just get to my throne. If you stopped laying around...
And what, Yella? We both heard that. That carnival barker. Lawson mutters wearily. Pet. Like the Lawsons have ever. He might very well die in this desert, but he'll die with his goddamn dignity. I separate us and you have no need of me anymore. That's the fact of it.
Need you?
Yellow croons in his ear. Something syrupy oozes its way into his tone.
Larson, I wouldn't have gotten this far without you. Of course I...
Can it, your highness? Yellow's always been a terrible bullshitter. Lawson humors him sometimes because he's also easy to flatter. Some people say that the closest things to gods are children. Lawson's been in the company of one for a week now, and he can honestly say that they seem one and the same to him. As he expects, Yellow drops the facade with a bull-like grunt.
So what?
He counters.
You're just going to sit there and die? Send us both back to the dark world?
Or hell, Lawson offers up cheerfully. He knows himself, knows what he's done. That's never been in question. He just thought he'd be able to find a different employer than God at the end of things. It was a fair play. He just had a bad hand. If Yellow had just kept his fucking temper in check. Inside his head, Yellow sulks. Lawson can feel it. Just as he can feel Yellow explode from the very depths of his mind. It's a pressure in the base of his throat, giving Lawson the eerie sensation of drowning.
Arthur was right. You weren't ever planning to let me go.
Oh boy, him again. You know, for a fella who treated you so badly, you sure can't give him up now, can you? Though Yellow bristles, he doesn't say anything. Lawson thinks he might be letting the matter rest for now, and he genuinely tries to get some rest. Maybe dreams will bring some revelation. Maybe he'll die in his sleep. At this point, Lawson's just too damn tired. Of course, Yellow really can't stand being ignored.
Did you hear what he said?
What, Arthur? Lawson asked. He said a lot of fool things, didn't he?
No, John. I guess. I asked him why Arthur cares about him.
Not sure why it mattered so much to you, but yes, I do remember. Because I care about him, is what John said.
Yeah.
Lawson doesn't know why that conversation has stood out. He's having a hard time getting his thoughts away from that Kane fella himself. The whys and hows of Arthur Lester don't interest him much. He hopes that Arthur choked on that rock.
Do you...
The question is uncertain. Fumbling. Yellow does this sometimes too. Earnest as a child, asking him about some facet of the mortal world. It's a real laugh whenever he does. Lawson tells him the truth, that none of it will matter when they both achieve godhood. He's not going to teach Yellow about the ins and outs of ant farm management when they're both destined to be so much more than drones. Doesn't keep him from asking, though.
Care?
Yellow practically trips over himself to finish the question.
About me?
A second's worth of pause. Then two. Lawson's cackling, gurgling laugh practically rips across the desert. He laughs so hard he thinks he cracks a rib. Tears sting what remains of his eyes, but boy, does Yellow know how to make him bust up from time to time. You don't need to worry about a thing like that. It's like I've been telling you. That sort of thing is gonna be so small when you become a god. Which Lawson is explicitly preventing him from doing. Look, the only people who care about that are bleeding hearts who have nothing else to offer the world.
I just think that it might be important. After all, they beat us. They think it's... And we can still pursue our goals if we care about each other, right? I can still be a god.
Yellow, Lawson complains. He's just getting awfully bored of this conversation. Frankly, he blames Arthur for this. A day or two having Yellow in his head has left behind an imprint. Tarnished a sparkling yellow god. So much as Lawson's tried to shine him up, there's still some dog shit that smells of Arthur Lester on his shoes. This is beneath you.
We've been stuck with each other for a week. We've talked about things. I've told you about what I remember as the King in Yellow. You told me about that story about your daughter, Addison. How you used to make snow angels.
Yellow trails off as Lawson starts laughing again. It's softer than it was before. Nothing more than a dry chuckle. God, but he sure could use a glass of water in a place like this. You think that was true? Yellow, I just told you a story. I told a fib. Yellow had asked about Addison one night while Lawson was trying to sleep. It had been snowing like hell outside. Only a small candle lit up the room. The memory of his dead boy was fresh in his mind. How scared he must have been in those last few seconds of death. Call him sentimental, but in times like that, it was hard to keep his cards close to his chest. Lawson didn't want to tell him a goddamn thing about Addison. His daughter is his business. The only thing he wanted to share with Yellow was how much it hurt to lose them, to fuel the fires of Yellow's vengeance a little more. Because it did. It did hurt. Much as he's had grander ambitions, he's never really been able to shove away the hurt of it all. So making up a story seemed like a safe bet. Yellow had bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And why not reveal it now? Chances are that Lawson's gonna die anyhow.
You lied to me?
Jesus, it's like pinning all his hopes and dreams on a toddler. The annoyance of it finally makes Lawson sit upright. All this time, and Yellow still can't let go of those frivolous ideas. If only he'd gotten to Yellow sooner, before Arthur had twisted that mind. "Oh, fiddle-dee-dee," he exclaims, irritated. One hand gestures out in a broad swath before him. It feels like desert. They'd stomped through an awful lot of sand. Yes, I lied to you. You want me to, what, apologize? That we aren't bosom buddies? We had a greater goal in mind, Yellow. Something more than common run-of-the-mill friendship. Why the hell are you so goddamn concerned about whether I care about you? Nothing. Nothing for a long while. This damn fool has made him sit up for nothing. And now he'll never get to sleep. Lawson just sits there, listening to the wind roll over the sand. Yellow is matter of fact.
When we get to Carcosa, I'm going to pull every single one of your joints out of their sockets. You'll be my puppet, dangling from a string.
Fair weather prickle puss, Lawson grunts. You spent so much time trying to kill Lester, and now I'm the villain in your eyes.
I'm still going to kill him with my own two hands.
And when is that, exactly? Because I do seem to recall the King in Yellow having an awfully hard time getting over to Earth. If that's where Arthur Lester even is anymore. Never mind that he couldn't even manage to kill the fellow in person. And that's when the idea occurs to him. The remarkable, marvelous idea. The way he might make it through all this. Not in one piece, certainly. But if Larson has learned anything, this mortal body is temporary. Face it, Yella. You need me if you ever want to track Arthur Lester down. The very idea makes Yellow scoff.
You really think I'm going to turn down godhood so I can kill one insignificant mortal? I'll find a way to get you to Carcosa, Larson. Then you'll be mine.
I have no doubt, I have no doubt. He turns his voice softer, more kind. Like maybe he does care about Yella. Or could, if Yella would stop being so gosh darn difficult all the time. Larson just wants to help him. They're working for the same thing. But you'll be king knowing a mortal has beaten you. Knowing a mortal has got one over on a god? Now, if you think you can move past that... He lets the phrase simmer in the air for a second. Yellow stays silent, and Larson's lips split into a devilish smirk. I'll walk us to Carcosa right now, Yellow. You have my word. Yellow says nothing. In that second, Larson knows he has him. He's managed to convince the little idiot yet again, and this is his second chance. Oh, he just wants to holler in victory. Damn that Kane son of a bitch. Larson is the one in control here, and he's just proved it. He'll get his win once and for all. When Yellow finally speaks, after nearly a minute of Larson celebrating his silent victory, he doesn't sound enthused. It's more resigned. Not particularly Larson's problem.
We don't know how to get back.
No, but look, Arthur made it back. Others have too. We'll find a way. And then because Yellow has revealed his weak point, one that Larson will carefully tuck away in the back of his mind, he adds warmly, together. Yellow exhales long and slow.
Okay.
That's the spirit. The knowledge that he might very well live through this has really done wonders for his energy reserves. Cautious of the rocky cliff above him, Larson clambers to his feet. Some of the wind strikes him in the face. Ugh. And is growing colder. But thank God the congealed blood around his torso is acting as a fine insulator. He shouldn't be walking like this. But damn if there isn't a little fire in his feet. They can go on a little walk. Try to see the nearest way out of this place. Try to see, huh? Now, Yella, you might have noticed that my eyes... Well, I can't see a single goddamn thing. You're gonna have to be my eyes until I can get that figured out. You have experience with that, he offers, bedfellows to warmth. Tell me what I ought to be seeing, where I should be going. That sound good to you? Yellow breathes out again. This time, it sounds like he's summoning strength.
We're in the middle of a desert, Larson.
He starts.
In front of you stretches a desert, the likes of which I've never seen. Almost crystalline. The dunes reflect the light of the rising and setting suns. They cast long, glimmering shadows that seem to stretch for miles. Only occasionally does sheer rock burst through the sand, left scattered around like so many building blocks.
Dregs, the last remaining parts. By SupposedToBeWriting. Spoilers for Part 40 of Malevolent. General content warnings. In Chapter 3, a heavy discussion regarding past child death. Chapter 3. Daniel almost doesn't answer the door. He's tired. He's in a lot of pain. He just had to take a dozen very troubling phone calls, and worse yet, he's not allowed to drink. The last time he opened a door, an Irishman shot him with a shotgun. All Daniel really wants to do is sit in his chair and watch the fire for the next 12 hours. So, nearly, he almost leaves it be. Except he hardly wants people talking. God knows they've already been talking enough. Word is starting to get around about Daniel's son-in-law. None of it is reflecting very well on him. Daniel can't bring himself to weep any tears about Aldrich Ward. But, well, it is a delicate situation. With this pain medication, he feels like he has the finesse of a drunken elephant. With a groan, Daniel reaches for his walking cane. He leans on it heavily. Even so, his chest tugs at every step. Never has Daniel felt so old. He stops at the mirror in the front hall. He frowns. It isn't exactly the normal high regard he holds himself. His mustache needs a trim. He's foregone a few buttons of his waistcoat. That's to say nothing of his tousled hair and the shine of grease on his nose. As it is, most dignity is simply a raised chin, and Daniel does just that before going to the door. There is a lady. She isn't a member of his congregation, but she's dressed like she plans on attending church. Large rounded glasses make her eyes seem much larger than they surely are, and she peers at him quizzically. She clutches a large pocketbook between her hands. The particular shade of plum on her wrinkled lips matches her outfit almost exactly, including the wilting flower in the band of her hat. He straightens his spine, despite his body's burning protests. "Mum," he offers politely, "may I help you?"
Are you, Daniel Saltzman?
"I am." He has no reason to hide it. "May I ask who you are?"
Marie Pellon.
She shifts her pocketbook to one gloved hand and extends the other for a handshake. Automatically, Daniel takes it. He doesn't shake it, because that seems oddly personal for a woman he's just met, but he does give a gallant squeeze before letting go.
I know your son, Arthur.
The words are punctuated with a furtive glance over her shoulder, like she expects to be overheard. Oh. Daniel's eyes widen. He wastes no more time and invites her in. Old habits take a hold, and he reaches out to take Marie's coat. But the resultant stab of pain genuinely makes him stumble backward. Ugh! Raising his arms, he finds is tantamount to torture. His shoulder hits a wall in the most boorish way, and now he's flushing like a schoolboy. Daniel flinches, humiliated.
Don't you dare try and help me.
There is a resounding sternness to her voice and fire to her eyes that most preachers would covet. Marie takes off her own coat, a shabby mauve thing. She folds it in half and sets it on the end table. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she offers an arm to him. Daniel waves her off. Oh, no. I'm quite all right. I can walk to the...
Mr. Saltzman,
she repeats.
I cannot stand when men try to suffer for the sake of it.
Marie is thoroughly disarming. It only occurs to him after he takes her arm and shuffles back towards the parlor that he could have put his foot down on the whole matter. This is his house, after all. But now it seems like it would be silly to. Marie is much shorter and leaner than he is, but she's nevertheless a grounding force as he limps back to his chair. He's embarrassingly out of breath when he sits. Worse yet, bursts of static-like pain grind against his injury. Daniel presses a hand to his chest and grimaces. Apologies, I had a bit of an...
Oscar explained the whole devilish business to me,
Marie says curtly. She doesn't sit. Instead, she stands there, pocketbook still in hand. Her eyes are firmly focused on him. Daniel's surprised at that. Normally, people spend at least a few seconds admiring the inside of his home. Even by New York standards, it's well furnished. He's made sure of it. The whole devilish business. Daniel asks disapprovingly. Seems improper. There was a lot of blood involved. Marie nods at him.
Yes, sir. And it seems to me like you need a cup of tea. I would offer you something stronger, but I've always been of the opinion that men of the cloth should abstain from that firewater. Too many drunken priests running around.
Okay, is all Daniel can manage to think, utterly astonished. Marie disappears without another word. He hears the kettle clanking in the kitchen. The turn of the tap. Daniel is flummoxed. A stranger has temporarily taken control over his life, but he doesn't have the energy required to stand up and put an end to things. Even worse, he's sweating. Daniel reaches for his handkerchief and blots his forehead. Damn that fireplace. A few minutes later, Daniel has caught his breath, and Marie extricates herself from the kitchen. She has 2 saucers and teacups in hand. Gently, she places one on the table beside Daniel's chair, stilling it so it doesn't clatter. For a moment, just as he reaches for it, Daniel is oddly overcome. He doesn't know why. It passes quickly. Finally, Marie sees fit to take a seat. Only then does she let her eyes wander around his parlor, at the paintings along the wall, at the marble fireplace, at the ornate drapery framing the long windows. Whether she likes it or not, Daniel doesn't know. He oddly hopes she does. She's been quite disapproving of everything else. His eyes are fixed on her the entire while.
So,
She says sternly, a little too sternly. Her gaze snaps back at him like a rubber band. Daniel thinks, for whatever reason, that he might have flustered her. He has no idea how the hell he's managed to do that.
has he left the city yet?
Daniel blinks. He's left the city.
He didn't tell you?
Marie does not like that. Daniel doesn't think he did. That being said, most of his hospital stay is a terrible blur. He remembers that Oscar fellow being there for a while, reading to him from a little Bible. Most people might have been nervous to have a priest by their bedside. Daniel's only offended that it was not the priest from his church, as much as he's indebted to Oscar. Oscar calling for help, certainly, but also aiding in the arrest of the man who shot him. Daniel doesn't remember that at all. Seems a terrible, strange dream. It's possible, he finally admits, a little embarrassed. I'm afraid that I didn't have all my wits about me in the hospital. I'll have to ask Oscar. Did he say to you where he was going? From the look on Marie's face, she doesn't seem too certain either.
I thought he might have went back to England. He seemed rather unsure.
To England? He can't fault Arthur for that, with all the trouble he's gotten into on this side of the pond. What Arthur has left over there, frankly, Daniel doesn't know. Nor does he know what to make of the idea. He expects it should sadden him to have his son-in-law so abruptly enter and leave his life. But there's a wound in his chest that hurts quite badly. Hard to tell if any of that is heartache.
He has promised to write me.
Marie offers.
When he does, I shall forward you his address.
Oh, and how do you...
I lodged him for several days, and he did...
A distant dream enters Marie's eyes then. She turns her attention to the fire, as does Daniel. The logs there crackle and burn, occasionally sending fireworks of sparks into the chimney. It reminds Daniel of another time, when he had far more people to put in this small parlor.
He did something for me that I won't ever be able to properly thank him for.
He did. Daniel feels akin to a parrot, and yet he realizes he knows very little of what Arthur has gotten up to. Other than, of course, being hunted down by a shotgun-toting maniac, chasing down a man named Lawson, and beating up a respected businessman in Freemasonry bathrooms. It all just seems so...
Yes, my sister. Well, she was gone for a very long time. Arthur found her, brought her back to me.
Her voice wavers with emotion. Daniel is already reaching for his handkerchief, but Marie beats him to it. She blows delicately into her own violet handkerchief.
I came here to tell you, Mr. Saltzman, you have raised a very, very good boy.
Oh. Daniel's chest squeezes again. Something flutters at the back of his throat. His own voice is unsteady. For many years, Daniel thought Arthur the villain of his life, the man who took his daughter away, the man whose inadequacies killed his granddaughter. Given the reports he's hearing, he doesn't know what to make of Arthur. All he's certain of is that he hasn't given the man enough credit. I know that he is Mrs. Pilon.
Ms.
But I'm afraid that I can take no claim in it. He's my son-in-law, you see, not my son. I didn't raise him.
Oh.
From the corner of his eye, Marie deflates.
No. He's told me that. I remember now. When we first met. It's dreadful, getting old, isn't it, Mr. Saltzman?
By God, does he know. Indeed.
And he must be a marvelous match for your daughter.
All of the air is whisked out of the room. Daniel abruptly and passionately wishes he hadn't let her in. This is growing to be too much. Much too much. Perhaps it's unbecoming of him, impolite, but all he wants is to crawl into bed and sleep for several days. On top of everything else that has happened, he doesn't want to talk about Bella, he says.
Bella. What a beautiful name.
After her death, people were always so reluctantly to say her name. Daniel has officiated thousands of funerals, even his parents' own. He knows it is not unique to his little girl. That didn't make it hurt any less at her funeral. Nearly all the attendees had known Bella, seen her when she was a child, chubby legs swinging back and forth through the stair banisters.
I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter. Your daughter was a wonderful woman.
Your daughter left us too soon. Even then, for all his vestments, it made Daniel want to scream. Why were they so frightened of saying her name? Marie has no way of knowing this, and yet Bella is no longer with us, he explains quietly, eyes averted. She had a child, and I'm afraid she... His throat squeezes shut. Daniel coughs into his fist. The effort makes him groan and put a hand to his chest. No, he's too weak to have this conversation. He simply can't. Daniel has known people to have lost children. At his age, it is a matter of statistics. Yet, he has never felt like he's had anything in common with them. And they, in turn, feel similarly alone in their misery. How could he ever explain all of it? So that people really understood his sins, his failures, and his agonies. He and Bella had argued for most of her pregnancy. By the time of her death, they hadn't spoken in months. Their only contact was the money Daniel faithfully wired into her account every month, because goodness, even a Saltzman turned Lester was not going to struggle. He hadn't known she was in labor. He hadn't even known she was due. He had come back from church that evening, poured himself a measure of brandy, and settled in to read. Then the phone had rang. Arthur Lester was on the other end. He slurred his words. The conversation had taken no more than a minute. Enough to let him know that Bella Lester, née Saltzman, his outgoing and kind little girl, had bled to death in a hospital. Sinfully, he almost forgot about his new grandchild, until Arthur told him that she had had a girl. The girl, Furrow, was perfectly fine. If he could do it all over, he would never have found fault with Bella. He would never have argued with her. He would have let her do whatever she wanted, spoiled her terribly, made her happy. He would have laughed with her more. How much time had he wasted trying to change things? Realizing that the silence had stretched on to an awkward degree, Daniel jerks and looks at his house guest. Marie is staring at him with wide eyes, full of woe. She squeezes her crumpled handkerchief.
Mr. Saltzman, you have my sympathies. I'm certain you raised a very, very good girl in Bella.
All her mothers do. All her mothers do. Mortifyingly, his voice cracks. He can only put the blame on the pain medication. Why now, of all times? He has brought up Bella's death before, almost professionally. It's been almost a decade since it happened. Now, it's striking to the quick of him. He can only blame the pain medication. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He blusters stiffly, bringing his handkerchief to his eyes. It's inadequate what he's telling her. Daniel wants to tell her that he deserves no pity, no sympathy. He was a restrictive, stern father. Bella's good qualities were in spite of him, rather than aided by him. Perhaps in an indirect sort of way, he had caused her death himself. Surely more fault could be placed with him than with Arthur Lester. At least Marie grants him his dignity. She looks away, towards the fire, and Daniel desperately tries to pull himself together.
I understand,
she says quietly, barely speaking above the crackling.
How it overcomes you, all of a sudden. It only takes one little thing. The other day, I stood in my front room, and the way the light came in, the same room I stand in every day, the same light I see every day. And yet, it was almost as if I could see my boy, Frederick. I hadn't felt that in a very long time.
Frederick?
My son, he died in the war.
I am so sorry. May God keep him. It was as if he hadn't spoken. Marie goes on, half musing to herself.
It is strange, you know? At the time, they seemed so unlike us, so naive, always wanting to leave this place, headstrong, determined, ready to say the big, unfriendly world isn't so bad.
He remembers the arguments with Bella, his thundering, her shrieking, making the paintings shake in their frames.
This is my life.
She's trembling, very slightly.
And now only that they're gone, I've come to realize maybe he was right. And I was wrong.
She is trembling, very lightly, movements exaggerated by the fire. This woman might as well be a stranger to him, and yet he's filled with an urge to cross the room and take her hand. Only his chest injury prevents him. That doesn't stop the warmth, though. That almost radiant light burning inside him. Someone understands, he thinks to himself for the first time. Marie knows the guilt, the grief, the heartbreak, how cold such feelings make them. If there was any justice in this world, any kindness, why did they, the wrong ones, the out-of-touch ones, the ignorant ones, survive while their hopeful, determined children did not? I have a picture of Bella, he suggests, after a moment. Would you like to see her? She looks just like her mother.
I think I would like that, Mr. Saltzman.
Before Daniel can reach his walking stick, Marie is on her feet. She sticks out one accusatory finger in his direction.
But I'll get it on your behalf. If you take one other step, young man, I will be forced to box your ears.
Daniel catches a glimpse of her face. Though misty-eyed, Marie is smiling at him. Her entire face brightens as she does, wrinkles tightening about her eyes, the warmth Daniel has in him. In that moment, he's certain Marie is experiencing the same. It's kept her practically aglow, and Daniel smiles back at her. Well, he jokes, for the first time in a very long while. We can't be having that.